Virtual World, Close Combat Mage. Chapter 1, Teacher Gufei. The sky was gloomy in Yunjuan City, and it drizzled from time to time. Somewhere near the spawn point one of new players within the city's Mage Academy, two NPC merchants were being surrounded by a dense crowd. One exclusively sold brooms, while the other sold only black-rimmed glasses. The Harry Potter series popularized the medieval concept of magic so much that even the latest Vermorp 3 masterpiece, Parallel World, could not escape from its influence. By adopting the standard character designs from Harry Potter, the two NPCs were able to rip off the new players twice. New players would receive 50 copper coins from the system at the start of the game. However, the two useless pieces of equipment were being sold at the price of 125 copper coins each, totaling to 250 copper coins together. Despite this, the interest of the players for the items did not diminish. They would arduously work for an entire day just for this sum. The entire Mage Academy was filled with players who were roaming about, dragging their long robes, with black-rimmed glasses on their faces and brooms in their hands. In this lively atmosphere, there was one person in a bad mood. Gufei, in his long mage robe, stood in the center of the academy grounds. He found nothing to do other than to sigh as he watched these energetic people. Mage was the last job class he wanted, and yet he just had to become a mage. This was all thanks to a student called Alpha. Gufei was a school teacher. He had accidentally overheard a few students discussing about this new online game that utilized virtual reality. When Gufei had inquired more about the game, Alpha gifted him a gaming account to get on his good side. Who knew that matters would go wrong even when backed up by good intentions? Alpha carelessly gave Gufei an account that had already been set up with a name and job class. Gufei only noticed this fact after he had logged in and undergone a full body scan, confirming his identity and other prerequisites for control. Because this was the first time that virtual reality technology was implemented for a MMORPG, it received unprecedented attention. The server could only handle so much at a time, so the developers resorted to limiting the distribution of accounts. Each person could only own a single account. That was why Gufei's only choice was to be a mage if he wanted to continue playing the game. Gufei felt like it was a pity to not play the game as he eyed the entire set of the latest VR equipment he had bought specially for the game. Hence, he had still ended up logging into the game. It was just a shame that his desire to play the game was now greatly reduced since he could not choose his dream job class. Currently, he stood at the center of the academy with no idea on what he should be doing. As he was zoning off, he suddenly noticed a few mages retreating back into the academy through the main entrance. Their robes were ripped and they seemed to have been beaten black and blue. Gufei saw a short, skinny figure among them and yelled out involuntarily, "Alpha!" That was the student. Poor in grades, bad at sports, a plain appearance, he had no desirable traits other than his silver tongue. He was a nobody that nobody liked in school. It was him who provided Gufei with his mage account. Encountering him inside the game, Gufei prevented himself from charging and beating him up after much restraint, as Alpha's action was probably unintentional. Besides, he had to uphold his status of being a role model for others. Alpha looked up and saw Gufei when he heard someone call him. He staggered toward Gufei and greeted, "Good day to you, sir." "All right, enough." "There's no need to do that," Gufei replied hurriedly. Being greeted by a student like that in a game was just too embarrassing. In fact, many players in the surroundings glanced at them out of curiosity after hearing Alpha's greeting. "What happened to you?" asked Gufei after dragging Alpha a little further away from the crowd. Gasping for air, Alpha said, Never thought that this would happen to me. I got beaten up as soon as I started wandering around the city." "What's your level right now?" Gufei was doubtful. He knew for a fact that there was nothing like a safe zone in the game besides the spawn point. However, the game still had a feature that prevented PvP for among low-level players. It was impossible for any players to engage in PvP with those who were below level 5. "I just spawned, so I haven't even leveled up yet," said Alpha. "Then, how did the others PvP you?" Gufei could not understand. "I didn't get PvP ed. I got beaten up," said Alpha. "Is there a difference?" Gufei was still puzzled. "Sir, PvP uses in-game skills to reduce the HP of a player's opponent. But we're in a virtual reality game now. They just beat me up like in a regular street fight. Even though my HP remains the same, it still hurts a lot." Alpha snarled as he rubbed the corner of his mouth. There are even people like that in here? Yeah, I didn't know before that this was possible in virtual reality, said Alpha. Virtual reality, Gufei thought. He blurted out, let me take a look at this. He then suddenly began to make his way outside. Wait. Alpha stopped Gufei. Sir, you're a mage as well. Your base strength and vitality are just no match for knights. You can't win a fight like this. Gufei smacked Alpha's head and said, have you forgotten? Your teacher here knows Kung Fu. He turned around and left with that. Sir. Alpha stared blankly at the sight of Gufei leaving. Teacher Gufei knows Kung Fu. This was a running joke in Yuan middle school. Apparently, even the principal laughed about this in private. What's shameless? The fact that teacher Gufei keeps insisting that he knows Kung Fu is the most shameless thing I've ever seen. It was true that Gufei was a little better at jumping, a little faster than others, a little more agile with his movement, and a little stronger than others. This was perfectly reasonable to them as he was a PE teacher. Yet, Gufei insisted that he had been learning martial arts since he was a child, which, according to him, was how he obtained his body of steel. He even claimed that he had defeated countless individuals since young. Nobody believed that, of course. This was because of a video that circulated on the school network of Yule in middle school. It originated from a security camera near the school entrance, probably uploaded by someone who had nothing better to do. It was footage of a young man being beaten black and blue by an old man as he cowered on the ground without putting up a fight. Old Man Rails Young Guy was the title of the video. The main focus of the video was undoubtedly the old man, and as for the other person, he was identified as Teacher Gufei, the same one who proclaimed that he had defeated countless individuals in the past. Was there still anyone left who would believe that Gufei knew Kung Fu after an incident like this? Everyone just assumed that he had read too many wuxia novels, and that he had a few loose screws. Fortunately, Gufei had no violent tendencies even though he kept on insisting that he knew Kung Fu. He was also someone who seemed to take his job seriously, so nothing horrendous came out of it. However, right now, Alpha was watching Gufei make his way out through the main entrance and turn his head to yell, which way? Alpha instinctively pointed to the right, and there went Gufei. Alpha blinked out for a moment before snapping back to his senses. He chased after Gufei. The game did an impressive job with the simulation undoubtedly. The pathway paved with stone was a little hard to walk on, but Gufei advanced at a fast pace. Alpha sweated profusely as he tried to catch up to Gufei. He saw Gufei stop at an intersection. Where are they? Gufei turned over his head and asked as he saw Alpha catch up to him. They were there just now. Alpha pointed at the fountain right in the center of the city square. No, sir, don't go, yelled Alpha when he saw Gufei walk off. Gufei smiled back at him. Don't come. I'll be right back. The back of someone in a mage robe always made players in game feel that that player was weak. In contrast, Gufei's back radiated with an unusual sense of strength and confidence. SHT. It's just another beating at most. Screw this. The real me won't get hurt, anyway. Alpha thought to himself before giving Gufei another chase. But Gufei was nowhere to be seen now. As Alpha looked around while he walked, he suddenly heard some miserable cries coming from an alley nearby. Alpha rushed there and stuck his head out to peek. Inside the alley, 4 people in the light armor for knights clutched a scrawny man as they pummeled him. Chilling sounds of punches striking flesh rang out. The person's nose was already broken while blood covered his face and body. It was difficult to determine his job class from what he was wearing. But even if he was a warrior who possessed the toughest physique, he would not be able to resist the encirclement of 4 grown men, since he was just a regular person who seemed to have no fighting experience. As of this moment, he had already lost the will to fight back, wincing and faltering in pain as he was knocked into a corner. The 4 people beating him up had ugly and threatening appearance. It was possible to tell that they were always up to no good from a single glance. Right now, they stopped beating the person as Gufei appeared in front of them. No one said a thing for a moment. But when the 4 saw that Gufei was in a mage robe, they smiled at one another knowingly. Let him go, said Gufei. You mean him? The bulkiest of the 4 lifted his leg and stamped the poor guy again. He signaled the other 3 with a glance. The 4 inched forward to surround Gufei. They all tried to prevent Gufei from turning around and running away, yet he remained where he was, allowing the four men to encircle him. A gleam of surprise flashed through the eyes of the bulky man, who was obviously this group of thugs' leader. But after eyeing Gufei closely, he felt a small degree of relief. From what he saw, the fellow before him was not tall. The fitting mage robe in the game did not hide his well-proportioned body. He was in possession of a wide chest, a thin waist, and long legs, making it apparent that he was someone who usually paid attention to exercise. His body was in a fine condition, so he could obviously put up a good fight. However, they were bounded by the game's algorithm right now. No matter how great someone's body was in reality, speed, strength, vitality, and so on were all determined by the data of the game. He was a mage, a job class with the weakest strength and vitality. All it needed was a single punch before Gufei would end up screaming in pain for half of a day. As it seemed, he had forgotten about that fact that he was still in the game due to the well-simulated environment. Without any speeches or taunting, the leader directly commanded, "Do it." Chapter 2, Kung Fu. Two people beside the leader rushed up, while another backed toward the alley's entrance to prevent Gufei from escaping. The two arrived before Gufei in an instant and threw a punch and a kick, respectively. Gufei unhurriedly took a slight step back, completely dodging the attacks from both sides. Raising his left leg, he kicked the guy on his left right in the center of his face. But just as Gufei was about to unleash his other leg to the person to his right, the latter had already retreated to the side out of shock. Gufei smiled wryly. He would be able to kick not just a single person if this were in reality. Right now, however, his speed was completely limited by the stats of a mage's body in game, preventing him from completing his move so that he had only used half of it. Furthermore, his power was greatly reduced. After being struck, the person on the left only covered his face, staring at Gufei in surprise. Were this in reality, taking a kick from Gufei to the face would knock him unconscious for at least 4 or 5 hours. He really does have some moves. The leader's expression changed, but he did not become too flustered. Gufei's kick did connect, but his strength was clearly limited. He immediately hollered, "He's just a mage. Nothing to be afraid of." He rushed into the fray to join his group after shouting that. Gufei moved about between the three people. Even though the mage's physique severely limited his strength and vitality, he was still in possession of just enough agility. At least the disparity was not too evident under the situation that everyone was still new to the game and did not level up yet. Gufei would throw a punch or kick from time to time, making contact every time due to his rich fighting experience. On the other hand, the three struggled to even make contact with Gufei's clothes. The leader became more and more flabbergasted. This guy has got quite a few moves. If he had a little more strength, the three of us would be knocked down long ago. Thankfully, he's just a mage. Gufei felt rather dejected right now. Many of his kung fu moves were being restrained by the various limitations of the game. In other words, even if he had chosen fighter as his job class, he would have remained unable to utilize his kung fu skills properly, unless he assigned some of his stat points into agility, strength, etc. after leveling up. On the other hand, it meant that as long as he assigned some stat points into those, he had the chance to use his kung fu despite being a mage. Gufei could not help but feel invigorated when he thought of this. The three people around Gufei soon realized that they could not do anything to him. They also saw Gufei becoming more spirited the more he fought, even revealing an extremely satisfied smile, so they all became rattled inside. In Gufei's eyes, these flashy, street-level techniques were filled with holes. Gufei had no intention to tangle with these people further, so he found an opportunity to back out from the encirclement. He laughed, "Still want to keep fighting?" The three had suffered quite a number of punches and kicks from Gufei. Although the strength behind those was not staggering, it was still unpleasant as they were repeatedly struck mostly in the same spot by Gufei. At this moment, the villain on the left sported a blackened left eye, the villain on the right possessed a blackened right eye, and the leader in the middle had a bloody nose. Afraid that the blood would get into his mouth when he spoke, the leader raised his head and wiped away the blood with his hand. Following this action, he said to his three companions, "Let's go." "Wait." Gufei said, "You plan to leave just like that without even apologizing?" "Apologize?" The leader laughed, "You couldn't even beat me to death, so why should I apologize?" True enough. After fighting for so long, Gufei could only give the three some black eyes and a nosebleed. The wounds were not unendurable and critical, and they were even more impossible to cause death. Death would only occur in the game if a person's HP hit an ill. In the current situation, the three were all beaten black and blue, but their HP remained full. This was probably one of the game's larger bugs. Gufei only chuckled faintly, bending down to pick up a rock. With a sudden stroke of his arm, the rock struck the leader's head with a thud. The leader was greatly angered. "You. How would you feel if I have struck your eye just now?" Gufei said calmly. The leader was stunned. He initially thought Gufei had simply gotten lucky with that throw, but the tone of his voice suggested that he was capable of hitting whatever he wanted. "Your eyes will of course be fine in reality, but it's the opposite inside the game. Don't forget, this is a virtual reality game," Gufei admonished. The leader retreated a few steps in fright, but he soon considered the plausibility of someone hitting his eyes just because the person said so. Was it possible for someone to be that capable? He became relieved inside and sneered, "Who are you trying to fool?" Without a word, Gufei picked up a rock by flicking it up with his foot. With a wave of his right hand. Ugh! With a sharp scream, the leader clutched his right eye as he collapsed to the ground. He rolled around as he cried out in pain non-stop. The pain of being hit directly inside the eye largely eclipsed being beaten to a blackened eye. "You've still got one eye," Gufei said to the leader. With another flick of his foot, two more rocks flew up, which Gufei caught with a wave of his arm. He swept his gaze past the other two people beside the leader. "I have two rocks in my hand this time." Sorry. The two quickly stammered out an apology, as they had been utterly frightened by the screams of their leader who continued to roll on the ground. Scram! Gufei waved his hand, and the two hurriedly pulled their leader up from the ground. Clutching his right eye with his left eye shut tightly, the leader trembled from the pain. He stammered, "Let's go. Carry me away quickly." The two were momentarily stunned, before hastily leaving as they supported him. As for the person previously guarding the alley exit, he had already disappeared long ago. Alpha was dumbfounded as he watched everything unfold from his hiding spot near the alley's entrance. He only returned to his senses after the four people had completely disappeared. Rushing into the alley, he stared at Gufei in shock. "Sir, do you really know Kung Fu?" "Of course, I've been practicing Kung Fu since young." Gufei's words were exactly the same as what he normally said back in school. Even his tone and expression were hardly different. Gufei really did know Kung Fu. He was born into a family of Kung Fu practitioners, so he had been practicing Kung Fu since he was young. While his family all had their careers and professions externally, they all had one goal internally, and that was the propagation of Chinese martial art traditions. But despite that being the case, Gufei was aware that no one in the family took the matter to heart except for his father and him. Unlike his father, who had quite a selection of sparring partners since some of his uncles knew a couple of kung fu moves off the top of their heads, Gufei did not have one in his generation. Not only that, everyone else in his generation held contempt toward Gufei, who had zealously been practicing kung fu since young. What century is this? The sky is filled with airplanes and the streets are filled with computers. Kung Fu? Can you make a living with Kung Fu? Gufei wanted to prove them wrong, but it just led to even more derision. There was no arguing against the truth. In this day and age, it really was very difficult to put food on the table through Kung Fu. Gufei had even tried each and every area in the sporting world, the domain where the specialty of Kung Fu could be leveraged the easiest. However, there were some sports that resulted in repeat offenses for Gufei due to his failure to grasp the rules, such as kicking people above waist level in soccer and making illegal personal contact in basketball. There were also some other sports where Kung Fu gave him no advantage, like chess, and even some sports that fell under Gufei's natural weaknesses, like swimming, diving and other water sports. Gufei could not swim. Gufei could not manage an actual Kung Fu sporting events either. The Kung Fu Gufei practiced focused on exercising the body and various fighting techniques. There were no advantages for him participating in performance-based martial arts categories. His father also explicitly forbade him from participating in events with full contact fighting, which he was best at. "We practice martial arts to train ourselves, to break through the limits of the human body. It's not for brawling," his father said earnestly. "Don't we break through the limits of the human body to better defeat our opponents?" Gufei was puzzled. "You're wrong. The best way to defeat your opponent is to shoot them," said his father. "Shoot them?" His father nodded solemnly. "That's right. Shoot them." But, before Gufei could finish speaking, his father threw a fist. They were a family of kung fu practitioners. If words made no sense, talk with the fist. In the past, his father was still strong and healthy, and his kung fu was better than Gufei. Furthermore, Gufei obviously could not lay his hands on his father, which resulted in him taking a beating. That was also the same day that he went to Yulin Middle School for an interview. All in all, after being eliminated from all sporting events, Gufei still managed to remain in the sporting world, if being a sports teacher counted. With the footage of him taking a beating from his dad widely spread, he was labeled as shameless whenever he tried to tell people about his kung fu expertise. Was it really that difficult for kung fu to survive in the current society? Gufei was overwhelmed by sorrow. Nowadays, he barely even participated in his family gatherings. Before, the older generation had still believed that Gufei was persevering with the propagation of kung fu. They had even considered him as a role model of the family, someone that the others of Gufei's generation should look up to. But now, he was just a PE teacher while everyone else would show up to the family gathering in splendid clothes, indicating their successes in life. The older generation began to hesitate as a result, and no one believed anymore that Gufei was the most outstanding in his generation other than his father. However, his father was even more adamant of his stance that kung fu is not to be used for brawling. "I will not allow you to harm anyone with kung fu," his father said firmly. "Not even bad people?" asked Gufei. "Not even bad people." His father was resolute. "Police are there for a reason. There are laws to punish them." "Then what is the use of kung fu?" Gufei was distressing. He hated how he could not understand everything like his father, caught in a dilemma over the purpose of kung fu. Chapter 3, Getting Started. One day in class, Gufei saw a glimmer of hope when he had overheard a discussion between a few male students about a particular upcoming MMORPG, Parallel World, implemented with virtual reality. He knew exactly what the virtual reality technology would incorporate. Surely, he could unrestrainedly use kung fu in the game unlike in reality, right? With that in mind, Gufei went ahead and bought the entire set of virtual reality equipment on the exact same day he had heard the news. He also decided the job class he wanted: fighter. The description, a warrior who puts every part of his or her body to active use in combat, convinced Gufei that the job class was the most fitting for him. Unfortunately, he had acquired the job class most vulnerable and least suited toward close combat due to Afa's carelessness. He had become a mage. Gufei was utterly devastated at first. But after what he had just gone through, he realized something: the various job classes in-game only determine the usable skills. In Gufei's case, he already possessed the skill set for an entirely different job class. All he needed to do now was assign the stat points accordingly. His actual job class mattered not. Although the stat point distribution for a fighter would definitely be more suitable for his kung fu use, it did not mean being a mage was completely useless. He could just be a kung fu mage. A groan snapped Gufei out of his contemplation. The person in the corner struggled to get up. "Sir." Alpha was too timid to approach the person, so he just called Gufei's attention. Gufei hurried over to the person in the corner and helped him up. "Are you okay?" I'm fine. The person stood up and inhaled deeply. His face was still littered with bruises, but he exhibited a scholarly vibe. No wonder he was chosen to be beaten up. Gufei and Afa supported the person to the fountain in the center of the city square, where he sat down. The person scooped up some water from the fountain to wash his face, becoming much more refreshed. He turned to Gufei and smiled. "Nice to meet you." "I am Fleeting Smile." It was obviously an in-game name, so Gufei also introduced himself using the name Afa had given his gaming account, 1000 Miles Drunk. Gufei slightly hated how he sounded like a drunkard with the name. The two shook hands. Fleeting Smile could tell with a single glance that Alpha was just a kid, so he directly ignored him. This is the first time virtual reality was implemented for an MMORPG. We were prepared for unexpected situations, yet no one imagined that something like this would happen, Fleeting Smile said as he rubbed his neck. "Judging from what you've just said, you seem to be a GM?" This caught Alpha's attention. He could be considered as an experienced gamer after all. "Just the term, GM or game moderator," hinted at the countless benefits that one could be provided in-game. GMs could do something as minor as disclose exclusive information or as major as assist players in obtaining extraordinary items directly. Players would condemn GMs who broke the codes of conduct in-game if they did not come across one, but it would be a different case once they did meet a GM. They would end up revering them like their father. Looking at the sky, Fleeting Smile nodded. Immediately after beta testing began today, we received reports of several groups of players taking advantage of their stronger physique and job classes to beat up people with weaker job classes, like Mage. I entered the game to take a look myself. Never did I imagine I would suffer a beating as well. How are you going to deal with this? Goofy asked. Beats me, said Fleeting Smile. It'll all depend on further developments from the tech department. There are still quite a lot of problems in the game, so it is likely to take some time before the game can be launched officially with fees. Goofy and Alpha also raised their heads when they noticed how Fleeting Smile maintained his posture. Rain continued to drizzle down, damping their faces in no time. Is he still rinsing his face? Goofy pondered before lowering his head again. What are you two looking at? Fleeting Smile surprisingly asked first. What are you looking at? Alpha questioned in return. My nose won't stop bleeding, boy, said Fleeting Smile. The two had no idea how to respond. After a long while, Fleeting Smile lowered his head and rubbed his nose. He said, all right, I'll go check out some other places. What about you two? I'm going to go grind for some levels, said Goofy. He was extremely eager to find out whether the limited physique of a mage would allow him to use Kung Fu after some stat points were assigned properly. Alpha hesitated a bit before saying to Fleeting Smile, I want to go with you. Fleeting Smile smiled. Boy, I am a scrupulous gaming employee. Don't expect to benefit in anything from me. With his little plot exposed, Alpha turned bright red. He said defensively, I have no intentions of doing anything like that. I just want to familiarize myself with the game by following you around. Well, let's go then. He laughed tryly before turning to Goofy. Do you want to come as well and familiarize yourself with the game? He placed much emphasis on the word familiarize, making Alpha's face even redder than before. It's fine, just go your way. Goofy waved at both of them. Separating with the two, Goofy wasted no time and dashed out of Yunju City toward where the monsters were. The maps located near cities were always the ones with the lowest possible monster tier. Parallel World was no exception. Even the monsters lacked originality. They were all a bunch of kittens, puppies, and bunnies, gentle-looking and normally friendly with people. Because of the implementation of virtual reality, the animals all seemed ridiculously cute with their realistic appearances. These low-level monsters would not even fight back. At most, the pugs would just whimper in pain after being smacked by the players. Goofy could not bear to continue after stomping a dog twice. The surrounding players were filled with hesitance as well. Some players who steeled their hearts also stopped involuntarily after receiving disdainful glares from the people around them. On the map, a large group of players looked at one another in dismay. They stood about idiotically, while the animals leapt around them enthusiastically. They would go up and rub themselves against the players' legs affectionately. I can't grind like this. A male player let out a long sigh and threw his weapon on the ground. Yeah, this is impossible. They're just too cute. A female player put away her weapon and picked up a rabbit by her legs. She gave the rabbit a good nuzzle before angrily saying, What's the deal with this gaming company? Why did they make these monsters so cute? Everyone began to talk and voice their dissatisfaction toward the settings of the game. Goofy complained with some people beside him before leaving alone. Since he could not grind here, he could just go somewhere else. That was what Goofy decided. To be frank, he had no interest in fighting animals. The kung fu that he had been training since young was intended to be used on human beings. There were never any lessons covering the vital parts of a dog that should be targeted. This did not mean that Goofy was inferior to a dog, but rather he found it demeaning to use the kung fu he was proud of on a dog, especially after so many years of hard work. Strolling alongside the main road, the city behind him grew further and further away. An endless stretch of hills appeared in front of him. The cute animals were now nowhere to be seen. Making his way over a hill, Goofy came across a dip or basin. It was a steep slope, and at the bottom of it was a campfire burning brightly. A few foul-looking people huddled around the fire, dozing off from boredom. With a single glance, Gufei could tell that they were not players but NPCs. After all, it was impossible for them to have the exact same appearance, stature, and attire even if they were sextuplets. Human NPCs were precisely what Gufei was looking for. They're monsters, right? Gufei thought as he inched toward the group. The 6 NPCs seated around the fire should have been alerted and discovered Gufei at the hillside long ago. However, they only showed alarm after Gufei reached a certain distance from them. They leapt up hurriedly and cried out as they pointed at Gufei. Gufei heard them saying, "Wow, here comes easy prey. Get him." Dialogues were displayed as words hovering above NPCs in other MOOCs. Since this was a virtual reality game, the dialogues had been programmed to be verbalized instead. The 6 charged forward with the exact speed and movements in sync. Their positions to one another remained the same even after they had arrived before Gufei. The NPC at the front cut to the chase and stabbed forward using a small knife for carving meat. Gufei dodged it and threw out a punch, landing a direct hit. This was very different from his fight against the players in the city back then. Everyone was protected from PvP. So Gufei's opponents had suffered nothing but some pain from the virtual reality technology. Right now, however, a punch from him, a mage with the weakest physical attack, immediately caused a slight damage against these monsters. The NPC swayed a little after taking in Gufei's punch and stabbed out with his rusty knife. Gufei dodged the stab once more before launching another punch at the monster. The NPCs surrounded Gufei but he maneuvered his way with ease, throwing fists and kicks at them from time to time. Gufei had no idea just what level they were, but his fight with them was much easier, as well as sparring, than his fight with the 4 players back then. Gufei felt slightly disappointed toward this VR game as it seemed that all it could offer was an extremely realistic environment. Right now, the monsters were still bounded by the same algorithm like in ordinary MOOCs. The NPC's repetitive attack patterns were the same as fighting no one at all in Gufei's eyes. In addition, they could not dodge his attacks out of their accord. The NPC's evasion speed and attack accuracy were purely dependent on their assigned stats. It was just a matter of time before Gufei defeated them. He began to strike the 6 evenly on purpose. After a few minutes of struggle, one finally roared out in grief and collapsed. The 5 remaining monsters soon followed suit when Gufei threw some more punches and kicks. Gufei's body flashed constantly after he did all this. These monsters of unknown levels had allowed him to level up 6 times. Chapter 4, Overhaul. Parallel World had 5 basic stats: endurance, strength, agility, intelligence, and spirit. 5 stat points were awarded for every level gained. Without any hesitation, Gufei poured all his stat points into agility. A sense of elation filled his heart when he felt that he could now throw his punches and kicks much faster than before. Not only could he regain his usual capability if this continued, he could probably even reach speeds his real self could never attain, given that this was a game. Though, Gufei had no intentions of becoming a deviant like that, just reaching his real self's standard would do. Next, he planned to pour the rest of his stat points into strength, so he could have the might he had in reality. He was just too weak right now. Gufei clenched his fist with all that in mind. Speaking of mercs, it was expected to loot the corpses of monsters after they were beaten. With his stat points distributed, Gufei began to search through the 6 bodies. He obtained 2 small carving knives and 6 money pouches after some time, each possessing a few dozen copper coins. It was impossible for monsters like these to be rich. Gufei stored all the coins into his money pouch. He lifted up his mage robe and slotted the 2 knives by his waist after scraping off the rust. For the sake of realism, the game had no job restrictions with regard to equipment. Some only possessed stat requirements, mostly falling under strength. Obviously, anyone could use basic weapons that had no stat requirements like these knives. Putting everything away, Gufei turned and walked toward another hill. There was another campfire with 6 NPCs ahead. However, before Gufei could even identify if they were similar to the 6 from before, the system issued an announcement. Dear players, the game shall be disconnecting in 10 seconds. Please be prepared to go offline. 10, 9, 8, The game disconnected after the countdown ended. Gufei returned to reality as the virtual scene faded before his eyes. What happened? Gufei muttered in his heart as he connected to the game's official website. The developers and administrators of Parallel World currently sat together. They were holding an emergency meeting at night to discuss the various problems that the beta testing had revealed on its first day. In order to maintain a certain level of mysteriousness for the world's first VRM Parallel World had been developed in secrecy. It was only announced in closed beta where it generated hype. The internal testing was all done by staff, everyone mainly focused on the characters, quests, skills, equipment, and so on, all important aspects of a typical MMORPG. However, the first day of beta testing today had already uncovered several major issues, almost all of which were unacceptable because of the full immersion experience that the virtual reality technology provided. First of all, the monsters in the beginner level maps were just too adorable, as mentioned by the players on the game's feedback channels. Players complained about this aspect the most. All the female players were absolutely dismayed by this. The male players also expressed dissatisfaction due to their fear of being despised by the opposite sex if they attacked the cute little monsters. This issue could be technically fixed forcefully along with the repetitiveness and simplicity of the NPCs, structures, and landscapes in the game. The really troublesome problems were the ones caused by the players. Incidents of violence occurred repeatedly in the half a day that the game was up, and the GMs were rather incapable of preventing them from happening. Since the immersion system formed the core of the virtual reality game, these violent incidents challenged the basic framework of the game and could not be solved through simple technical modifications. After repeated examination of the issue, they decided to include this type of bouts into the PvP setting and to further raise the PvP protection range to level 10. They could only wait and see if this sort of PvP would lead to situations where one hand casted skills while the other attempted a dirty sneak attack. This is good. Realistic, they say. Ha! Virtual reality gaming needs to be realistic. This is exactly what we wanted, said one of the top executives at the meeting in an attempt to comfort everyone. However, the next problem was something truly immoral that could not be covered up using the excuse of realism - the sexual assaults on female players. Even the staff did not expect that the virtual technology would expose the darker side of gamers in such a thorough fashion. However, the company could not simply remove the sexual aspects of the game, since full immersion existed as a complete system. Moreover, the existence of sexualized content was actually Parallel World's hidden selling point, and the senior executives would not allow it to be removed completely. Their final decision was to design a system that required the consent of both parties. It did end up stumping the technical department. However, imagine a romantic environment where lovers were just about to take the next step together, and then a prompt box popped up with a ding. Player X would like to invite you to have sex. Do you accept? Even if they selected yes, the originally romantic atmosphere would deteriorate to a no. In addition, how would they control the degree of the sexualized content? Would they control just the act itself? What about kissing then? And groping? When someone proposed the particular question in a hypothetical prompt box, player X is ready to grope you. Do you accept? Everyone at the meeting facepalmed. In the end, the big boss made a decision. No matter the case, let's create the system first. We can make necessary adjustments based on the players' reactions and comments. The meeting ended after discussing a few other issues. All the game departments immediately threw themselves into the emergency work. The game would undergo a complete overhaul after being operational for just half a day. This was definitely a first in the history of the gaming world. Fortunately, they could use the excuse that they were inexperienced, as this was the first time virtual reality technology had ever been implemented on such a scale. Nonetheless, they were under great pressure without a doubt. The boss nodded his head with satisfaction as he watched everyone leave in a hurry. Only one person remained seated as he stared at the boss with a cheeky smile. Only after all had left did the boss ask, "Zia, do you have anything else to say?" "Boss really does know me well." The person called Zia stood up and approached the boss, casually grabbing a seat nearby. "Speak." The boss gazed at him. Yi Xiao was a member of the R&D department and among the core members of the overall production team. "Yup. I saw something today that made me feel it would pose some problems in the game," Xiao said. "Oh? Because the game is fully immersive, some people are able to bring the abilities of their occupation and reality into the game. With this natural advantage over the rest, it would be rather detrimental toward the notion of a balanced game that we are pursuing, said Xiao. What sort of abilities can affect the game? The boss asked. For example, Kung Fu. Kung Fu? Xiao nodded confidently. Today, in the game, I met someone who simultaneously defeated 3 knights with just his bare hands despite being a mage. He must be a Kung Fu practitioner in my opinion. There are really people like that? The boss asked with a frown. Xiao nodded. Just think about it. Policemen, soldiers, martial artists, boxers, and so on, all these people could create an imbalance in the game. Then, what do? We can't possibly prevent people from playing the game just because of their occupation, the boss asked. That can't be helped. Xiao shook his head. The boss laughed instead. If there's no solution, you won't stay behind to tell me all this. Xiao began to laugh as well. It's just that I got an epiphany from someone like that. Go on. In traditional MMOs, everything revolves around battle. But now that we have virtual reality, we should expand our scope of development and enhance the other systems besides the combat aspect. We can let those people with skills in life bring in their expertise as well. This way, there would be some sort of balance in the game at the very least, Xiao said. Saying it is easy, but developing that idea is not, the boss said. It's worth trying. Alright, come up with a detailed plan and I'll mention it in the next meeting. The boss gave him the go signal. Okay. Xiao felt elated. I'll be leaving, then. Wait. The boss stopped him. I say, why did you enter the game? Don't you know the rules in the gaming industry? As a member of this company, you're not allowed to enter our games. Some stricter companies don't even let their relatives do so. I've never agreed to that point. We made the games, so we obviously love the games. Why exactly should I lose my right to play? Don't worry. I am a scrupulous gaming employee. In the game, I am just your average player, Xiao said. Given your knowledge of the game, can you really stay as an average player? The boss asked. Don't worry. I won't touch a single of those hidden parts, Xiao promised. I'll get someone to monitor you. What's your in-game name? The boss asked. Fleeting smile. Xiao smiled as he left the meeting room. Chapter 5, Fireball. A large-scale patching was carried out for the game, and the developers kept everyone updated with their progress on a daily basis. The issue of cute monsters was resolved on the very first day. The kittens, bunnies, and puppies were replaced completely with nasty-looking feral animals like boars and wolves. The second day passed by, and the third day went on. Every player followed the updates eagerly. Even though the previous beta testing only went on for half a day, all had a gaming experience like nothing they had had before. The anticipation for the game was stronger than ever. Gufei was no exception. The first thing he did as soon as he got home every day was to check the latest developments regarding the patching. Gufei often found himself smiling as he woke up, since he had finally found a place where he could unleash his kung fu. The wait for the game's reopening lasted for an entire month as there were simply too many things to patch. The idea from Xiao was given the green light, but refining every single aspect of it would have taken even more work. In the end, the gaming company decided to make the game playable first before gradually refining it further with future updates. Gufei unfortunately had classes on the day the game went back up, so he logged into the game eagerly as soon as he got home after school. It had been quite a while since he felt so eager about something. He was on a hill when he was disconnected before, yet he was now back to the spawn point inside the Mage Academy. Did he have to start all over again? Gufei checked his level and found no change. He remained at level 6. The coins from that day also remained with him, as well as the 2 small, rusty carving knives that hung by his waist. Looking around, he noticed other mages gathering around an NPC in a long queue. Gufei lined up as well out of curiosity after confirming that it was neither of the NPCs that sold glasses and brooms. What's going on here? Asked Gufei. Spells, answered the person in the front as he glanced back at Gufei. As it turned out, the patch had purposefully lowered the required level for learning skills and spells so that the players could fend for themselves as soon as possible. Players could learn a skill or a spell as soon as they entered the game, and they could learn more job class specific abilities for every 6 levels they reached. So besides buying glasses and brooms, the neophyte mages of the academy had this to do as well. The queue moved very fast, so it reached Gufei before he even knew it. He learned the first spell for mages after speaking with the NPC. The spell was nothing original, as Fireball was something that mages seemed to learn first in every game all the time. However, as Gufei had reached level 6, he learned a second spell besides Fireball called Ring of Fire as well. If Fireball was the main offensive spell for new mages, Ring of Fire would be the main defensive spell to protect the mages' fragile bodies. But of course, the usage of spells was a little more special in a virtual reality game. In the center of the vast academy grounds, over 1,000 players had gathered together, yelling out in unison, "Fireball!" Fireballs formed swiftly in front of everyone. This created quite a spectacular sight as numerous fireballs floated midair. All the mages were thrilled, but Gufei noticed a player beside him to be pale white. He seemed to be fairly shocked. "Fire!" someone shouted out, and the rest immediately followed suit. The whole area echoed with sounds of fire. However, the Mage Academy was a safe zone, so offensive spells like Fireball was prohibited. When everyone had declared fire, the fireballs remained suspended midair. The player beside Gufei grew even paler. Gufei could not help but ask, "Are you alright? FCK." The guy swore. He asked for Gufei's in-game name and nonchalantly added him as a friend. "Look at my name. System notification, Fireball added you as a friend." Gufei immediately broke into laughter. This person's name was Fireball. That would explain why he was startled when over 1,000 players shouted the spell in unison. As there were a constant number of people practicing casting their first spell, there was also a constant shouting of Fireball. The player called Fireball could no longer bear with it and decided to leave after bidding farewell to Gufei. He, it's noisy in here. I'll leave as well." Gufei followed him. The two left the Mage Academy and headed to a map outside Yunjuan City. Along the way, Fireball grumbled to Gufei about his misery. As it turned out, he too had obtained the gaming account from another person, where the name and job class were already chosen. Gufei immediately felt sympathetic. Fireball did not actually mind it at first, but he began to feel a little annoyed with the name after his experience earlier. His focus would definitely be drastically affected when friends and enemies alike yelled Fireball in future battles. Right now, all he could hope for was that this beginner's spell would soon be forgotten by all as they proceeded further in the game. Gufei could not help but sympathize with Fireball, grumbling back at him about his tragic story of being forced to become a mage. Not knowing the full story, Fireball assumed that Gufei just disliked the mage job class, so he started going on and on about the advantages of being a mage. In any case, Gufei formed a rather good impression of Fireball, as he was one of the few mages who did not wear glasses or carry a broom. They arrived outside the city in the blink of an eye as they conversed. The results from the first patch were evident. The map outside the city was filled with feral wolves and boars, and by listening to the players' complaints, they were all hideous, encouraging everyone to eliminate these monsters from just a single glance. This greatly increased many players' desire to level up. All the maps outside the city were filled with people hunting the feral wolves and boars. Although the monsters looked tough and ferocious, they were actually very weak. They could only resist feebly under the assaults of the players. The spawn rate of the monsters did not match up to the demands, so dozens of players would encircle a monster as soon as it had spawned. Fireball's blood began pumping as he watched on. He took a few steps forward and yelled, "Fireball!" A fireball was formed slowly in front of him. "Fire!" hollered Fireball. And with that, the fireball was unleashed. With a boom, the fireball landed accurately on a boar that was being pummeled by a group of players. The boar collapsed as flames splayed out with the aroma of barbecued meat. "Nice!" Fireball clenched his fist, applauding himself for his accuracy in his first attack ever. However, the group of players who fought the boar all turned toward Fireball. The way they gazed at him was as if they were looking at something more loathsome than the boar. "What's up, everyone?" Fireball waved at them. "Kill stealing. How rude." Fireball's greeting was met with scorn. "What? You mean this? Isn't this just a normal battle?" Fireball was dumbfounded. There were clearly around a dozen players encircling the boar, So how was it considered kill stealing when he attacked it? Didn't the loot and EXP just belong to whoever killed the monster first? Are you blind? Can't you tell we're all from the same guild? Lamented one of them. Guild? Fireball glanced at Goofy, puzzled. Goofy was dumbfounded as well. The game had just begun. Who had the power to create a guild? They all nodded together, and one of them shouted, "Do you still want to play the game after kill stealing from the heaven-defying guild?" There was definitely no guild more oppressive than this one, but Fireball showed no fear as he faced the group of menacing, oppressive players. Goofy was rather surprised by this. Fireball stared at them straight in the eyes and stated calmly, "So what if I kill steal? I'm only level 1. You can't do anything to me." Goofy laughed at this. No wonder this guy was so dauntless. Goofy also knew about this change as he had followed the updates daily. It was something that directly targeted the incidents of violence that even he had personally experienced before. The PvP protection originally prevented players from being targeted by skills, so even if low-level players were hit, they would feel no pain. The current patch had also classified the players' assault methods as a part of PvP. So if something similar to before happened again, it was impossible for Goofy to blind his opponent. Even if the rock struck the opponents accurately, they would feel no pain. Fireball ignored how threatening the other players were right now as he was protected by the system. Still, these people possessed a defiant mentality since they even dared to call their guild heaven-defying. They showed no signs of backing down and charged up even as Fireball flaunted the fact that there was nothing they could do to him. "What are you all doing? I'm level 1, level 1, level 1. While Fireball repeatedly stressed his level, he was grabbed by his arms and legs and lifted into the air. One person yelled at the top of his lungs, "Tie him up onto that tree." However, his suggestion was rejected promptly by someone else, "Just toss him into the river." The developers did not mention that the PvP protection covered a player being thrown into a river. Fireball became desperate and he struggled frantically. Everything seemed hopeless. Even if he was a fighter and not a mage, he would not be able to do anything about the situation. Hoisted high up in the air, Fireball was akin to an offering from an ancient tribe to their deity. Fireball looked around from above and as soon as he spotted Goofy, he shouted out, "Hey, you! What's your name again? Save me!" Goofy nodded and dashed swiftly toward the crowd. He blocked their way. "Why don't we all come down and talk over this? Let's put the man down first." "Who the hell are you?" Scram! No one treated Goofy seriously after glancing briefly at him. The game had only been online for less than a day, so it was impossible for him to be able to repel so many people just by himself even if he was a professional player. Not to mention that the person was just as a mage. "He's my friend. Now put me down." Fireball continued to yell. "A friend? Let's toss him into the river as well." A guy waved his arm and many people began to charge at Goofy. Goofy was startled. Fireball was not the only one protected from PvP. These people clearly were nowhere close to level 10 as they were still hunting the low-level monsters just outside the city. Fights occurring under the protection of PvP were painless, so Goofy would definitely be forcibly carried away with no way of escaping if he let them get close to him. Goofy hastily took a step forward and quickly leapt up, turning and rotating his body. His left leg swept through the air from right to left, forming an arc. Thud, thud, thud. The first 3 people were knocked down by Goofy's sweeping kick. The 3 people stared at each other blankly after collapsing on the ground in a row. They were clueless as to what they should do. While it did not hurt, there was still the sensation of being attacked physically. It felt like someone had swept past their faces, but the force behind it was overwhelmingly strong. They found it to be even more perplexing than the paranormal-like absence of the pain they usually would have felt due to the recent game patch. The 3 of them sat on the ground stupidly, not even moving a muscle. The others witnessed it much more clearly than the 3. They were caught off guard by Goofy's clean sweeping kick. "What skill is that?" the people asked one another. "Do you have a skill like that?" someone asked a mage in the guild. "No, I don't." "There's no such skill." "I don't have it either." The group of people, comprised of different job classes, all looked through their skill sets, but no one found anything along the lines of spinning kick or whirlwind kick. "Just what is his job class?" All began to doubt the mage robe they were looking at. This was a virtual reality game where equipment was not restricted by job classes, So it was probable for Gufei to be hiding his job class by wearing a mage robe. A hidden job class? Someone began to assume. All had their eyes fixed on Gufei. Fireball had missed seeing Gufei's kick as he was still hoisted in the air. All he felt was that the surroundings had grown quiet, and that the people carrying him seemed to have become statues, holding him steadily in the air. "What are you lot doing? Put me down already!" Fireball bellowed. His voice snapped all the people back to their senses, and they let go without even thinking twice. Fireball regained his freedom and fell flat on his face, managing to sneak into FCK. Ignoring the others, Gufei walked through the crowd and pulled Fireball to his feet. Everyone looked at one another helplessly, but no one dared to stop Gufei. Chapter 6. What a fast mage! Where are we going? Fireball could not help but ask as he saw that they were traveling further and further away from the beginner's maps outside Yunjuan City. There's no way to grind levels there with so many people. I'll take you to another place, Gufei said. Where? Fireball looked around. The rolling hills around them were obviously not the same terrain as outside the city. In the game, this meant that they had already arrived in a new map. Gufei did not answer Fireball and instead brought him up a hill where he pointed toward a small pond at the bottom. Look, there. However, he could no longer find Fireball as he glanced back. Then he heard Fireball's voice coming from beside his foot. DMN, get down quick. Don't you want to live anymore? They're going to see us. Fireball had already crouched down low on the ground. He stuck his head on the grass as he wormed his way backward while talking to Gufei in a hushed tone. It seemed extremely tiring. What are you doing? Gufei found it both vexing and amusing. Those are vagabonds. Do you know what level those mobs are? I would have stayed in the city and steal from others if I've known that you're planning to bring me here. He was only brave enough to raise his head and talk after creeping back half a meter. This is nothing. Just watch. Gufei smiled, lifting his mage robe with one hand. What are you doing? Fireball was shocked, but he soon saw Gufei pull out a dagger from under his robe. Are you a thief? Fireball was stunned. Fireball! Gufei called out. Huh? At the same instant Fireball answered reflexively. He saw a ball of fire appear in front of Gufei. Equipment could not determine the identity of players, but skills and spells could not be faked at all. Gufei was indubitably a mage. You're a mage. Fireball confirmed. Then why do you have that dagger? To fight monsters. Gufei replied as he ran down the hillside. Hey, are you crazy? Fireball shouted before diving forward by half a meter once more. He raised his head and saw that Gufei was already halfway down the hill. Wow, what a fast mage! Fireball exclaimed. At this moment, Gufei had already entered the range of the 6 monsters. The 6 stood up and encircled Gufei. He's a goner. He's definitely dead meat. He's such a big noob. Fireball muttered anxiously. The 6 monsters were definitely above Gufei's level. But even if they weren't, they were not the type of monsters that could be hunted arbitrarily by a single person since they possessed the ability to assist each other. Fireball dared not blink, as he felt that that was all the time it would take for Gufei to be reduced into a white streak of light. But what happened next before Fireball's eyes was nothing short of a miracle. Gufei weaved gracefully among the 6 vagabonds as the knife he was holding turned into a fast blur. The NPCs screamed as their blood splashed from time to time. Fireball gasped as he froze in place. Just who is this person? He suppressed 6 monsters at around level 20 to the point where all their attacks missed. No. They did not seem to be all misses. Gufei had dodged them. What level was this person at? 40? 50? But the game had only been up for less than a day, so how was he able to be at such a high level? Even if he was at such a high level, could a mage like himself charge up and engage these high-level monsters face-to-face alone? Could he have a hidden account, a hidden job class? Or was he a legendary player that broke the game? As Fireball closely observed Gufei's kung fu, Gufei really did become doused in white light, the glow from leveling up. He had already defeated all 6 vagabonds. Gufei's combat efficiency had significantly improved with his increase in agility as well as with the help of the small carving knife he had obtained. Fireball stood up and ran toward Gufei with his arms flailing widely. Gufei looted the monsters before making his way toward Fireball. He smiled calmly. In his eyes, killing these 6 rigidly programmed monsters was far too easy. Bro, what's your level now? Fireball asked in admiration. Goofy checked his stat window and answered, level 10. What, 10? Fireball sat back down on the ground again even though he had just gotten up. He pointed at the 6 monster corpses. Do you know what their levels were? I've checked the website. About level 20, Goofy said. A level 10 mage killing not just one but 6 level 20 vagabonds. Fireball exclaimed in disbelief despite having just witnessed it with his eyes. So what? I killed them because I could, Goofy said nonchalantly. Fireball gaped speechlessly at Goofy. How did he kill them then? Through his superb level of control of the game? But nothing could be done about the level of control in virtual reality. I know Kung Fu. Goofy smiled. FCKme, you can use Kung Fu in virtual reality? Fireball whispered. Before Goofy could even be bothered to reply, a shout rang out from the other side of the hill. Found them. They're just ahead. The voice came from a person standing on the right hillside. He continued to point and gesture at the pair as he hollered. Goofy and Fireball stood up and looked at the side of the hill. Players surged in from every direction and 2s and 3s stored them. There were at least a few dozens of people who had come. What's going on? Fireball looked around as he asked, is there a boss mob? He looked around once more, but he found no other monsters other than the 6 corpses from before. They're coming for us, Goofy said. How do you know? Fireball questioned. They radiate killing intent. Goofy answered. Bro, you've got to be kidding me. Fireball rolled his eyes. Unfortunately, Goofy was right. The group of people slowly gathering at the bottom of the hill and closing in on the 2 of them radiated with aggression. Told you they were coming for us, Goofy said as he pointed toward the person at the very front. Fireball squinted his eyes. He recognized the person as the player whom he had a dispute a while ago. SHT, isn't he that obnoxious person from before? What a waste of manpower, Fireball complained, then shamelessly added, I'm just level 1. You see that pond over there? Goofy pointed toward the foot of the hill. Remembering that person had wanted to throw him into a river previously, his face paled instantly. He prepared himself for the worst. Is that pond deep? No idea. Goofy shook his head as the group finally arrived in front of them. Goofy had never considered fleeing from the start. Fireball self-assuredly stayed put either, thinking that he was just level 1 and that the group could not harm him in any way. But now that he was reminded by Goofy about the previous river incident, Fireball began to have regrets for not having fled immediately. Both parties were at loggerheads with each other. There were at least 50 or 60 people who spread out to surround the 2. Goofy exhaled deeply. He was a kung fu practitioner, not a superhuman being. Even if he possessed the means to beat all these people, he would still be restricted by the game's PvP system. However, whether their purpose was truly to start a fight was another story. He saw apprehension reflected in the eyes of some of them. What's the matter? Goofy asked. Guild leader, that's him, said someone from the group as he pointed straight at Goofy. Goofy immediately turned toward the one referred to as the guild leader. He was a person with average stature, lanky body, and straight as a wire hair. His hair made his face appear longer and body lankier. His skin was coarse and pitted like the skin of an orange fruit. His small pair of eyes moved up and down on Goofy. Goofy believed him to be a thief from the way he carried himself. The person smiled after carefully examining Goofy. Hello, I am Heaven Defying Guild's leader. Hello, Goofy greeted back neutrally. We came to Parallel World from a game called Magic Domain, the guild leader said. Goofy nodded his head in acknowledgement. Being a young man himself, he of course knew some stuff about mercs, especially about Magic Domain. He used to frequently hear people raving about the game. Before Parallel World appeared, Magic Domain was probably the most popular MMORPG around. In Goofy's school, the teachers highly regarded that game as a scourge, always fearing that their students would become addicted to it. But with the successful creation of the first virtual reality game, almost all the mercs had met their end. Magic Domain in particular suffered an unprecedented drop in its number of online players ever since Parallel Worlds beta became public. The forums were filled with people selling their accounts to switch to Parallel World. Apparently, the game's creators were working themselves to death just to change Magic Domain into virtual reality. Regardless of their efforts, they could no longer have that honor of taking the first bite of the proverbial cake. Fireball was more well informed of this matter than Goofy. Having been a former player of Magic Domain, He had of course heard about the heaven-defying guild. The guild was reputed for being fairly tyrannical in magic domain, even possessing quite a presence in the gaming world. This was especially true of the guild's leader, Sword Demon. Be it equipment, level, skills, or proficiency, he was always ahead of many. His mastery of the magic swordsman job class could also be considered as at the height of perfection. Nearly every magic domain player looked up to Sword Demon as their top idol. Even Fireball used to worship him back in those days. He had never imagined that they would meet like this. Staring at this unpleasant looking youngster, Fireball could not help but ask, "Are you truly that Sword Demon?" Sword Demon felt somewhat dissatisfied with Goofei's calm reaction. Fireball's response, on the other hand, felt much more gratifying. He nodded with fake modesty, "Yup, that's me." His amiable reply, however, revealed his haughtiness. "FCK, why do you look like that? You're that Sword Demon? I think I've seen a real demon instead." Fireball rattled off crassly, directly striking Sword Demon's sensitive spot. Chapter 7. The dagger-wielding mage. Sword Demon had a glorious reputation back in magic domain. The heaven-defying guild he had single-handedly founded was something many players flocked toward, racking their heads to find a way in. When he had announced that he wanted to switch to Parallel World, everyone fervently answered that they would follow him and rebuild the guild only if he remained as their leader. But who would have thought that everyone would retain their real appearance in the virtual reality game? The contrast between Sword Demon's overly plain appearance and his handsome player character in magic domain was just too shocking. The contrast was so great that a majority of the guild members refused to accept it. A large portion of them quickly expressed their desire to go solo. The female players who used to flock around him never appeared again after catching a glimpse of him from afar. In the end, only about 50 people out of the close to 1,000 original guild members were willing to follow him. Sword Demon was bitterly disappointed by the ugliness of human nature. However, as a top-class, once glorious gamer, he was still someone who possessed abilities. Sword Demon had no intention of giving up. Deep down, he had firmly made up his mind to relive his former glory in Parallel World and let the name Heaven-defying Guild resound throughout the game. Making himself stronger was obviously the first step toward achieving these goals. However, Sword Demon felt that he was at a disadvantage from the first day of beta testing. The term control had lost its advantage in this highly simulated environment. In addition, his hands could only be regarded as godly if he was using a mouse and keyboard to play a game, but now they were basically useless. As a top gamer, he knew that he could only overcome this huge disadvantage by thoroughly researching the VR game's mechanics. Fortunately for him, the game underwent a major overhaul just after half a day of beta testing. This provided him another opportunity to familiarize himself with the game's mechanism. For this purpose, he dedicated an entire month researching and studying every piece of information he could get his hands on about the game. He even practiced and memorized some fighting stances in real life to prepare for his clashes with the in-game characters. Hence, Sword Demon was brimming with confidence when he re-entered the game today. In actual fact, he had already reached level 25 in less than a day. No ordinary person could ever fathom just how much hard work went into all that. Gaming, for him, was not just about playing for fun. The best time to create a gap between levels was at the beginning of a game. Sword Demon would never miss such an opportunity. He did not waste his time by bringing his followers around as he had far exceeded their levels, so he was not among the people in the map outside the city. Only when Goofei had left with Fireball after knocking down the 3 guild members with a single sweep of his leg did Sword Demon's followers return to their senses and report back to him. However, Sword Demon was very puzzled about the content of the report. He had thoroughly familiarized himself with all the skills for every level and job class in Parallel World. If he had to take a guess, Goofei's kick closely resembled the swallow counter skill of a fighter. Such an advanced skill could only be obtained when one reached level 54. How was it possible for someone to know that skill right now? His followers had yet to reach level 10 as well. So how could an offensive skill be executed on them who were still under the PvP protection? As a result, Sword Demon hastily returned from his previous map and traveled in the direction where the two had gone off to along with the rest of the guild. Sword Demon did not seek revenge over a minor matter like kill-stealing a low-level monster. He only wanted to know how Goofei had managed to accomplish such a feat. Unfortunately, Fireball's few words struck Sword Demon right in his sore spot. The easiest way to aggravate Sword Demon was to mention his poor looks, and Fireball had skillfully done just that. Sword Demon glared angrily at Fireball before asking Goofy, "What's your level now?" 10, Goofy replied. "Great." Sword Demon nodded. "You two, up against me. How does that sound?" "SHT man, I'm only level 1." "Level 1? What's your level, anyway?" Fireball fired back indignantly. Goofy added, "Yeah, he's only level 1. He can't engage in PvP." Sword Demon smirked after hearing their words. He had no intention of fighting the two from the start. He had just issued the challenge so that the two would feel repentant. However, he did not expect Goofy to follow up his statement with, "So just myself will be enough." Sword Demon's eyes widened, not quite believing what he had just heard. "What did you just say?" "What? You wanted to PvP, right?" Goofy asked instead. Sword Demon could no longer retract his earlier challenge after hearing Goofy's question. Obviously, not wanting to fight was not because he was afraid, he just felt that it's not worth it. Sword Demon considered his debut battle in Parallel World as too important to be wasted on a mere level 10 mage. But Sword Demon couldn't think of any good excuse to back down from a challenge he had proposed himself, so he could only swallow his regret and proceed with the fight. "Very well." As Sword Demon scanned his surroundings, he spotted a wide, empty field next to the pond at the bottom of the hill. He pointed to it and asked, "How about we fight over there?" It was his first PvP in Parallel World after all. A wide space was just right for him to fully display his in-game skills. Goofy was fine either way. He just nodded and headed toward the area. Fireball swiftly followed behind and urgently whispered to Goofy, "Are you out of your mind? You've agreed to PvP without even knowing his level." "Nothing's wrong with that. A fight is a fight." Goofy laughed carelessly. Goofy and Sword Demon faced off each other on the empty field by the pond. Sword Demon's followers stood right behind him and they were all feeling very nervous. They all had faith in Sword Demon, which was why they continued to stick to him in the game. Could Sword Demon remain as glorious as before? The current battle might have had the answer to their question. Standing behind Goofy, Fireball was lost in his thoughts. He carefully inspected every part of the pond and estimated its depth. He tried to find a corner where he could help himself out if he was ever thrown in. He felt that Goofy had no hope of winning the fight. Just who exactly was Goofy up against? It was that Sword Demon, a top gamer in the online gaming world. There was never an online game that he had set foot on where he had not emerged victorious. Magic Domain? That was just one of the highlights in his gaming career. "Let's begin," Goofy said as he lifted his mage robe. He pulled a dagger out. "A dagger?" Sword Demon was dumbfounded. This person was clearly a mage. A few skills in-game were unrestricted and available for all. They could be learned after reaching the appropriate level and paying up regardless of the job class. Appraisal was one of those skills. This skill was not only for appraising equipment, the job classes and levels of monsters and players could be appraised as well. Rich in gaming experience, Sword Demon learned the skill as soon as possible. He had already appraised Goofy and Fireball as soon as he came across them. The two were definitely mages, one at level 10 and the other at level 1. Sword Demon's proficiency level over the skill was still not high enough, so he could not appraise their equipment. Therefore, he was quite taken aback when Goofy pulled a dagger out. "Just a noob, I see." Sword Demon shook his head, feeling rather disappointed. His first ever battle would actually be against a dagger-wielding mage. There was nothing monumental about this fight at all. Sword Demon casually pulled out a weapon from his waist as well. It was also a dagger. Sword Demon's job class was a thief, an actual dagger-wielding expert. "After you." Sword Demon felt that it would be dishonorable of him if he attempted a first strike against a low-level opponent. "Please." Goofy held onto his dagger with a reverse grip and clasped his fist. He bowed toward Sword Demon. Sword Demon was momentarily stunned by Goofy's gesture. By the time he recovered from his hesitation, Goofy had already shot forward and stabbed out. So fast. Sword Demon was in shock. With his decent understanding of the game, Sword Demon could tell that Goofy had allocated all his stat points to agility. Mage and agility. Recalling back to his previous online gaming experiences, there had been many instances where mages focused solely on agility. However, These players with high dodge rates or even absolute dodge rates required the support of extremely high level and extraordinary equipment. It could be said that the results would only be apparent in the later stages of the game. Also, players would only attempt stat point distributions like that only after the gaming algorithms had been fully understood. Parallel World was a new game, so everything was still being explored. Players were restricted to one account in the game as well, so deleting and starting all over again was impossible if the character was ruined from incorrect stat point distributions or from other reasons. As a result, Sword Demon had only allocated 10 levels worth of stat points even though he was already level 25. He could not risk distributing his other stat points before he identified a correct path of stat point allocation. The agile mage before him was an extremely reckless existence in Sword Demon's eyes. Before his thrust was fully executed, Gufei saw Sword Demon move, so he turned his hand and pursued. Gufei's reaction speed was unexpectedly fast. However, Sword Demon's reflexes were not just for show either, considering how he had honed his fingers to a godly speed. He ducked down deftly and dodged the sweeping hand as well. However, he had never thought that Gufei's assault was still incomplete. Gufei followed through with the mist swing and twisted around, facing Sword Demon with his back. Gufei unleashed another jab by thrusting from under his armpit. Sword Demon was still in a half-crouching position after dodging the dagger earlier. The dagger headed directly for Sword Demon's head as Gufei stabbed out. Without any more time to dodge, Sword Demon was reduced to any other person, instinctively holding his hands up to cover his face as if he was taking a beating. In the end, his dagger just happened to clash with Gufei's thrust. With a clank, Sword Demon borrowed the force to retreat by a few steps, pulling away from Gufei. Both their hearts churned. Gufei did not anticipate that his opponent would be capable of dodging all three attacks from him. These three attacks were not just any old moves from him. Taizhui, Liai, Yecha. These were a set of dagger moves honed and refined by Gufei through his painstaking practice. Each of them was equally lethal. Of course, this was only made possible due to the game. Gufei would not execute these three moves so easily in reality. A little carelessness on his part could cost a life. Gufei thought his assaults were flawless at first, so he did not expect them to actually fail. The person in front of him had never learned martial arts before, but it was evident that he had rather fast reactions. Aside from that, he was also someone who focused on allocating his stat points to agility. This was a very important aspect. Furthermore, due to the special traits of his job class, he was undoubtedly superior when it came to speed. Gufei realized another problem because of him. Only a kung fu practitioner like him was capable of such great speed in real life, but everyone could possess the same speed, if not faster, in this game as long as the stat points were allocated accordingly. Never would he have thought that he would be able to come across something impossible in real life within this game. Gufei was utterly delighted by this. Chapter 8, Sitting and Waiting. At this moment, Sword Demon's state of mind completely differed from Gufei's. The 3 strikes earlier left him breaking out in a cold sweat, especially with the last attack. He had covered himself purely out of reflex, which was why he somehow managed to block the blow. The opponent was a mage while he was a thief. He should have been the one thinking of methods to approach the opponent, while Gufei should have been doing everything he could to maintain a distance and employ ranged skills to attack. But now, it was actually the mage who engaged the thief with a dagger, with an end result of the thief keeping his distance after receiving 3 attacks. No matter how experienced Sword Demon was, it was impossible for him to expect that he would come across a situation like this. He initially focused on the mage's beginner spell, Fireball. Despite its low level, the damage it could cause if it landed was as substantial as a few strikes of his weapon. But in the end, Gufei did not even use magic and attacked with a dagger instead. This situation was far too absurd. With both sides in a deadlock, neither of them dared to make the next move so easily. Sword Demon quickly calculated his battle plan. Without a viable long-range attack skill, he needed to be in melee range if he intended to take down his opponent. But just the thought of closing in on Gufei had him in cold sweats. Fireball. Gufei suddenly turned toward the crowd to speak, but a ball of fire quickly lit up before him. Oh, no! He was so consumed by fear after witnessing Gufei's melee capabilities, Sword Demon had forgotten that he was ultimately a mage. As soon as he saw the ball of fire form, Sword Demon began to move in a serpentine motion. He had seen the fireball spell in game before. After firing, the ball of fire would only track the target within a small area for a brief period of time. The spell could be easily dodged as long as the target ran out of the range or avoided being hit. Sword Demon zigzagged about crazily, waiting for Gufei to say the word fire. Unexpectedly, Gufei became momentarily stunned as he stared at the fireball in front of him. He muttered, "Not you. I was calling for that person fireball. PSSSHHHH." The first fireball was extinguished, but a second fireball was immediately lit. Sword Demon's movement became even more erratic now. Gufei stood there with a fireball that was still not unleashed, completely at a loss. Eventually, the ball of fire fizzled out. Sword Demon had to take precautions from afar against the fireball spell, while he could not prevail in close combat either. How could he fight at this rate? He was helpless. The situation was unchangeable. He had thought that Gufei repeatedly ignited a fireball to limit his movements, so Sword Demon also used his class exclusive skill before Gufei had the chance to rekindle his third fireball. Sword Demon's body began to fade and blur like mist, before disappearing before everyone's eyes. Stealth! Someone in the crowd shouted out. It was obvious that stealth was a trump card of the thief job class, so it was hardly surprising. The real reason behind everyone's shock was that the skill could only be learned upon reaching level 24. While they knew that Sword Demon's level surpassed their own, no one had expected it to be so high. Everyone expected nothing less from a first-rate gamer in the world of online gaming. Even those who had become worried after witnessing Gufei's 3 strikes began to feel more reassured. Levels were the clearest indicator of strength in RPGs. With a stark disparity between level 24 and level 10, resistance was futile. Sword Demon completely disappeared from everyone's eyes. He hid somewhere on the field as he paid attention to Gufei's movements. Sword Demon did not activate stealth immediately when the fight began because of the Mage's level 6 spell, Ring of Fire. A thief would immediately be revealed if he attempted an attack or was hit by an attack when under stealth. Although the damage from Ring of Fire was negligible, its area of effect extended a little bit further than a melee range. Thus, it was impossible for a thief to approach a mage silently when Ring of Fire was still active. Of course, Ring of Fire had a weakness as well. It would only last for a certain amount of time after being casted, and it was also limited by a cooldown time. The difference between the two times made it impossible for a mage to ensure that his body was constantly cloaked in Ring of Fire. This difference in time was a good opportunity for a thief to make a melee assault after approaching the opponent. Sword Demon had extrapolated 2 possibilities for this fight based on his experiences. Beginner mages would usually begin PvP by casting Ring of Fire, or they would have no clue that he was in possession of a thief skill only obtainable at level 24. Therefore, he originally planned to approach Gufei and deal a fatal blow after Gufei's Ring of Fire had expired. But now, it seemed that both the possibilities he came up with were wrong. Neither did Gufei use Ring of Fire, nor was he surprised at Sword Demon's activation of stealth. In addition, this mage's melee ability was far scarier than his, something he would not have thought possible had he not experienced it himself. Forced into such a disadvantageous situation, Sword Demon could only activate his stealth skill first. He believed that Gufei would immediately cast his Ring of Fire in response to his use of stealth, and since his skill lasted 3 seconds longer than Ring of Fire, he was certain that he could use that time to finish the opponent as long as he stayed slightly outside the area of effect. There was the possibility that the Ring of Fire spell had been leveled up, allowing it to last longer than his stealth, but this was basically impossible for a level 10 mage with neither the time nor funds. Using profound knowledge of the game and accurate deductions to formulate the best battle strategy, this was the style Sword Demon had adopted from RPGs. He was not one to completely underestimate an opponent, even if he was merely a level 10 mage. Unfortunately, he had made an error in his judgment once again. Gufei had not casted his Ring of Fire spell, nor did he move about in an attempt to evade the unseen foe. He simply remained standing still. Has he yet to learn Ring of Fire? Or is he really the noobiest of all noobs? Suspicion filled Sword Demon's heart, but this was an opportunity that could not be missed. He rapidly closed in on Gufei, as he tried to predict the possible choices Gufei might make. Gufei did not move even a single muscle. Sword Demon even suspected that Gufei might not even be aware of the impending crisis unless he stood right in front of him and breathed. Sword Demon came up behind him in an instant, yet Gufei still showed no reaction. Sword Demon readied the strongest thief skill he currently possessed without further thought just before his stealth state came to an end. It was the level 18 thief skill, Backstab. Just like its namesake, this skill could only be used from behind. Under normal circumstances, it would deal 40 damage plus 200% attack. Although the people's gasps around them would alert Gufei of the cancellation of his stealth skill in the instance he used the attack, Sword Demon's dagger would have pierced his heart by then. An instant death was the only possible outcome for a mage receiving backstab from a thief 15 levels higher. No one in the crowd understood what was happening, nor did anyone know that Sword Demon had already arrived behind Gufei. At precisely this moment, Gufei abruptly turned around and extended his left hand swiftly. Everyone could not help but gasp in confusion. Sword Demon slowly appeared from the region of blank space. His right hand was outstretched with his dagger clasped tightly, but Gufei's left hand held his wrist firmly. This scene was frozen in everyone's mind even as the battle erupted. Gufei promptly twisted his left hand and applied pressure to Sword Demon's wrist. The spike of pain temporarily sapped the strength of Sword Demon's fingers, forcing him to let go of his dagger as it fell to the ground. Gufei took this chance to scoop out with his right hand, dropping his carving knife and catching the falling dagger instead. Together with his left hand, he brought Sword Demon's right arm against his back. Gufei lifted his left arm and stepped behind Sword Demon, placing the dagger close to his neck. The series of moves Gufei executed displayed the full extent of his adroitness. Sword Demon had been completely subdued by the time everyone recovered from shock. No one knew if it was threatening to have a blade pressed against the neck in this game. Regardless, everyone could easily determine the winner of this battle. Wow, amazing! Fireball exclaimed in admiration. Fear and anxiety had gripped his heart when he realized he would be the next target if Gufei was defeated. Yet the outcome that unfolded before his eyes was both beautiful and spectacular. He rushed out from the crowd, incessantly clapping his hands in congratulation. Patting Sword Demon on the back, he said, "Aren't you level 24? How does it feel to be so thoroughly beaten by a level 10 mage?" Ha ha ha. Fireball's satisfaction made it seem like he was the one who had beaten Sword Demon. Sword Demon's face darkened. He had lost very convincingly. He was defeated despite being given the chance to perform a stealthy backstab, so how could he still express discontent? Those were all the tricks a level 25 thief like him could pull. Just who is this person? None of the techniques he used seemed to originate from any skills in the game. Just because the match had a clear result did not mean that Sword Demon was happy about it. He felt a mixed bag of emotions at this moment. He had doubts toward Gufei's skills but also felt the pain of his mediocrity. To think he was a top expert in the world of online games, yet here he had just lost pitifully to a mage who was 15 levels below him. Had he really become a thing of the past now? Gufei suddenly released him as he was thinking about this. Sword Demon turned and took a few steps back. He looked at Gufei and asked, "What's your name?" "Thousand Miles Drunk," Gufei replied. "Excellent. I'll be back," said Sword Demon. Gufei nodded with a slight smile. Sword Demon turned to leave, but Gufei suddenly called out, "Wait, your dagger." He then tossed it toward Sword Demon. Sword Demon caught it while feeling stunned. This dagger was called Frost Memories. Aside from its attack, it also boosted agility by 25 points, possessed a 30% probability of dealing a fatal blow, and another 10% chance of inflicting tier 3 freezing damage. Sword Demon obtained it serendipitously after killing a boss mob of unknown level while grinding monsters in a forest. There was not a single weapon on the official website that had stats which surpassed it. Half of his remorse and disappointment of the loss came from the fact that this weapon had fallen into Gufei's possession. Sword Demon could not believe Gufei would return it back to him at this moment. He held the weapon tightly in his hand. A huge amount of pay-to-win players had flooded mercs nowadays. Weapons at such a grade could easily fetch a price equal to a few months of an average salaryman's wage. Was he clueless? Just what was going on? He could not understand, Nor did he know what to say. He could only nod and thank Gufei before leaving. Chapter 9, Method of the Pros. The heaven-defying guild members were filled with much chagrin as they witnessed the utter defeat of their leader. They all glared scornfully at Gufei and Fireball before taking their leave. Fireball showed no mercy by whistling and sneering at them now that the tides had changed. In his mind, the glorious online gaming expert that he used to look up to was now reduced to just a single word: PFTTTTTT. Drunk bro. Fireball had already decided on his new idol as the heaven-defying guild's members left. How did you know he was behind you? Fireball asked. Because of his killing intent. Gufei laughed. Killing intent? Does something like that really exist? Fireball asked softly. Of course, Gufei nodded. My ability at detecting killing intent is nowhere near perfect. My fourth uncle is the best at it. For instance, he can sleep very soundly when you make any noise near him, but he would wake up immediately as soon as you focus all your attention on him. Do you really know Wushu? Fireball said. It's not Wushu, it's Kung Fu. Gufei corrected. What's the difference? Wushu is for strengthening your body. Kung Fu, on the other hand, is about vanquishing your enemies and protecting your homeland. Gufei sighed as he said that. This was where his father's viewpoint clashed with his. His father repeatedly insisted that they learned Wushu, but Gufei felt that it was definitely Kung Fu. Protecting the homeland, is there still a need for that in the current times? Fireball said. No, Gufei laughed, which is why I'm playing this game. Oh, can I learn it too? Fireball had developed an interest. Gufei hesitated. Am I too old for it? Fireball was slightly disappointed as he was in his 20s already. Judging from the tropes of some wuxia novels, a protagonist at Fireball's age would have long ago become a prominent figure in the Jianghu. If Fireball just started learning martial arts at his current age, all the ladies would have hooked up with others by the time he finished. Surprisingly, Gufei shook his head. Kung Fu is intended to be learned after puberty, at least at the age of 15 or 16. Your age is close to mine, so how can you be too old? It's just that learning Kung Fu is very time consuming. I think you'd need to spend at least 8 to 12 hours every day. Do you have that much free time? No, Fireball replied without even thinking twice. Or you could use the time you spend in game. No, that's fine. I'll not learn it. Let's just continue with the game. Fireball interrupted Gufei abruptly. Gufei could only smile bitterly at this. The 6 vagabonds by the pond had respawned at the moment. Gufei was about to charge at the enemies after picking up the meat carving knife that had been dropped during the battle when Fireball said from his side, Drunk bro, the monsters here are too high level. I'm not as skilled as you, so I'm gonna go to another map to grind. I don't mind you tagging along. Gufei said. I am not here to tag along with others. I am here to play the game. Fireball proclaimed firmly. Alright then, see you later. Gufei laughed. Drunk bro, take it easy with all that grinding. Don't leave me too far behind with the levels, okay? Fireball said while he ran and waved. Let's go for a drink later in the city if you're still online. Sure. Gufei replied. They both went their separate ways. Gufei continued grinding in the current map. He had a fantastic time during his battle with Sword Demon as it had been quite a while since he had the chance to engage in an intensive fight like that. Gufei relished the very instant when victory and defeat would be decided. Even though his previous opponent was rather amateurish in terms of combat, it would only be a matter of time before everyone would become competent with battle since Parallel World was a game filled with simulations of real fights. That would be when the real fun started. As for the monsters in front of him right now, Gufei made quick work of them. Artificial intelligence was just artificial intelligence in the end. Their single-minded attacks with predictable patterns were completely useless against Gufei. There would be a day when all players figured out the attack patterns of every monster in this game. For instance, the person called Sword Demon from before would be capable of such. He would eventually become a formidable player with his brains and reflexes. Gufei grinded for 2 whole hours near the pond at the bottom of the hill. In Gufei's eyes, he was not fighting the monsters but actually honing his kung fu forms and routines. He enjoyed the feeling of sweat soaking his robe. He never found the repetitive kung fu moves to be dull either. The reason Gufei could persevere in practicing kung fu while his other family members gave up one by one was because he was filled with a genuine love for the martial art. hence never getting bored. Gufei reached level 16 after dispatching 6 more vagabonds. He scooped up some water from the pond to wash his face. He felt really refreshed when the cold water splashed on his burning, sweaty face. Gufei was impressed from the bottom of his heart for the first time with the game's simulation. The sweaty feeling and the icy sensation from the cold water were simply fantastic. Gufei received a message notification at this moment. He checked his inbox and as he expected, it was from Fireball. "Drunk bro, what's your current level?" "I am level 16 right now," Gufei answered. "What? So fast?" "I just reached level 10 myself." Gufei could feel how gloomy Fireball was just from his message. Fireball took 2 hours to reach level 10, and yet Gufei had reached the same level just by engaging in 2 battles near the pond. It seemed that challenging high-level monsters was an effective way to level up. "Drunk bro, are you done yet? I saved up on some coins, so come back to the city and let me buy you a drink." Fireball sent him another message. "Okay." Gufei replied and began to loot the 6 monsters he had defeated. He managed to obtain from them a small amount of coins, some pieces of vegetation of unknown uses, and a few more meat carving knives. Gufei had already acquired more than 10 of these knives and he had run out of places to store them. Even though it was supposed to be completely realistic, the players still required an inventory system to store their items as this was still a game. A pocket was the design for the inventory system in Parallel World. After picking up an item, a player only needed to put it inside the right side pocket by his waist and that item would be stored in the inventory. It would never drop once stored inside. When a player wanted to retrieve an item, he just had to put his hand inside the pocket. The player would sense the neatly arranged boxes and by extending his hand in a box, the item within would naturally fall into his hand. A player could take any item out by removing his hand carrying it from the pocket. It worked amazingly, just like Doraemon's dimensional pocket. Gufei climbed up a hill after he finished sorting out his stuff. Looking around the vicinity, he tried to identify the way back to Yunjuan City. Gufei saw someone else by chance, grinding at another pond at the bottom of a hill. The person used stealth to sneak behind a vagabond, unleashed a backstab upon it, before stabbing wildly at the encirclement of monsters around him. He would retreat hastily to regenerate after killing a monster, and repeat the same fighting strategy once his HP recovered. The dagger in the person's hand shone with a faint blue light. Gufei smiled as he recognized the person as Sword Demon. Sword Demon's level seemed to be in the 20s, so it was suitable for him to grind here. However, the vagabond monsters that moved in groups of 6 were rather inappropriate opponents for independent players. Aside from Gufei who possessed deviant prowess in physical combat, probably only a player like Sword Demon, who was an excellent tactician, could handle the fight. Only 3 vagabonds were left from the usual 6 that gathered around the campfire. When the 4th vagabond spawned again, Sword Demon charged forward immediately and unleashed a sequence of moves: stealth, approach the monster, backstab, normal attacks, retreat, regenerate HP, wait for the respawn, and then repeat. The way Sword Demon attacked was actually the same as Gufei's method, a specific and repetitive fighting pattern developed to counter the monster's characteristics. Gufei could not help but feel impressed by him. But in the ensuing moment, Gufei noticed that there was another person observing Sword Demon from a nearby hill. The person was dressed in a form-fitting, purple robe, exhibiting her body shape perfectly. She was clearly a female. It was difficult to get a good view of her face from the side. All Gufei could see was how she held onto her left arm with her right, and 2 of her fingers from her left arm tapped lightly on her lips. She closely observed Sword Demon below. Gufei had never thought that even a woman could tell that he was something else. Gufei chuckled good-naturedly at this. Sword Demon had just retreated to his resting spot after finishing off a vagabond. He seemed to notice that his inventory was full when he touched his pocket and let out a long sigh as he lifted his head high. He soon noticed the 2 people observing him from atop the hills. He turned around and left after a brief pause. I wonder if he could recognize me from this distance, Gufei thought to himself, seeing as he had no special equipment on him that was striking like Sword Demon's frost memories. He and the woman immediately went their way now that the target they observed was gone. Gufei snickered in his mind as he noticed that the lady was heading in the same direction as Sword Demon. Is Sword Demon getting an admirer? The gossiper in him had awakened, but he gave up on going after them as he recalled Fireball was still waiting for him at the tavern in the city. Chapter 10, Particular Tastes. Gufei noticed on his way back that the number of players gradually increased the closer he got to Yunjuan City. A majority of players had yet to focus on leveling. Instead they were reveling in the wonders of full immersion gaming. Even just holding hands with someone or patting a person's shoulder was a novel experience to them. Gufei entered the city gate and headed toward the central square after asking Fireball where the tavern was located. Three important structures, the tavern, auction house, and bank, were spread out around the square. Gufei made his way over to the tavern and pushed open its door. The place was not as dimly lit as Gufei had imagined. Rather, the lighting had a natural glow that created a warm and cozy atmosphere. There were many players inside, most of them were boisterous and joyful. As for those who were supposedly drowning their sorrows in alcohol, they had not appeared just yet. The wooden racks behind the counter were filled with various alcohol bottles. The NPC bartender had a friendly attitude, serving and greeting every customer with a smile. Gufei looked around, yet it was Fireball who found him first from the crowd. He called out from the table he was occupying, "Drunk bro, over here." "Hey, Fireball." Gufei greeted back. With a whoosh, a fireball ignited right in front of him. The players around him were momentarily shocked, but they laughed in unison upon realizing what had happened. "Hey, isn't that?" Gufei suddenly noticed someone familiar in the tavern. Fireball turned to look before smiling. "Yeah, that's Sword Demon. He arrived not too long ago." "He took a detour, yet he had arrived before me," Gufei said in surprise. "What?" Fireball asked blankly. "He was grinding at the same map as me before." "I saw him," Gufei explained. "Oh, his level must be pretty high," Fireball said as he poured Gufei some liquor. "Come on, drunk bro. Try this alcohol. You must surely love alcohol with your name, right?" Gufei grimaced. "Did you forget? My username was also given by someone else, just like yours." "Oh, right. I forgot." Fireball smacked his forehead. "I wouldn't have invited you for a drink if I had remembered. I've spent a whole silver coin for this." Fireball lamented. A silver coin was equivalent to 100 copper coins. He could have bought one beginner weapon from the blacksmith in the early stages of the game with the money. Fireball must have spent quite some time killing monsters to accumulate that amount. "No worries. My treat." Gufei laughed. Since he fought monsters of a much higher level than Fireball, his income was naturally significantly higher as well. Sword Demon had also noticed Gufei's presence by now. Their eyes met and he nodded at Gufei, which could be considered as a form of greeting. A huge racket pervaded the whole tavern. Suddenly, the tavern door squeaked open. The whole place descended into silence. The remaining, scattered sounds all came from the people who had their backs to the door, including Gufei. Gufei followed everyone's lustful gazes and saw a lady. The robe she wore was familiar, but Gufei was unsure if she was the same woman he had seen back at the hillside. He saw plenty of similar outfits along the way back, which meant the robe was job class specific clothes. Clothes in the game would automatically fit the form of a player. Thus, everyone's body shape could clearly be seen. The body of the lady was slender and svelte, curvy in the right areas with no apparent flaws. Her whole body did not have a shadow of excess fat. With such a perfect figure, it was no wonder everyone in the tavern was dumbfounded. Her looks were not as stunning in comparison. Still, she had a fairly comely face. Her eyes beheld a watery gaze that captivated people's hearts, and the delicate corners of her mouth formed a smile that made everyone feel a sense of warmth and closeness. With that dainty smile, the lady nodded slightly at everyone in the tavern. The tavern patrons returned back to normal, breaking into a hubbub once more. The ogling looks from them at the lady were now replaced with an air of false sanctimony and disregard. They could only sneak in a few glances if they wanted to continue ogling. The tavern was packed, so there were currently no tables available. Some tables had empty seats and the male players at these tables all revealed looks of excitement. However, no one was foolish enough to take the initiative and personally invite the lady over. Whoever made the first move would suffer the wrath of the people. Even just being in temporary close proximity to the lady might have guaranteed being tied up and thrown into a river after leaving the establishment. To maintain peace, everyone waited patiently for the beautiful lady to make her choice. Fireball was visibly excited as the lady walked over gently. He and Gufei sat at a table with 4 seats. This was an excellent arrangement since there were only the two of them there. He had never thought that the lady would only gaze past the two empty seats before making her way past them. Fireball's eagerness vanished right then, before sniffing in the end. Wow, how fragrant. It's a game. How could there be perfume? Goofy threw a withering look at him. It's body fragrance. The game simulated body fragrance. Fireball insisted. Goofy laughed. He could no longer be bothered insisting with him. By now, the lady had already made her way past a vast portion of the tavern, yet she had still not chosen a seat. She seemed like she was about to leave through the other door. Suddenly, she stopped right beside Sword Demon. Sword Demon sat at a table with two seats, so there just happened to be a free seat since he was alone. All held their breath, while many were stumped. The lady sure had very particular tastes. To think she would pick the person who was possibly the ugliest one out of all of them. Although Sword Demon was an online gaming professional, he was still just an ordinary man. His heart surged a little when he saw the beautiful lady stop beside him. However, the lady did not take a seat and instead patted him on the back with her right hand. The whole place fell silent again. Did they know each other? Everyone wanted to know the answer to this question. It was Beauty and the Beast. That was probably what a large number of them were thinking, while some had even thought it out as a case of a flower betwixt cow dung. Sword Demon was flattered, but he obviously knew he was not acquainted with the lady at all. Just as he was about to talk to her, the lady laughed and pointed at his feet. You dropped your coin. Everyone, including Sword Demon, bent over and looked. A shiny gold coin lay beside Sword Demon's foot. Oh, thanks. Sword Demon bent over instinctively to pick it up, still pondering inside if this was a good excuse to share a drink with her. You're welcome, the lady replied, leaving toward the exit just as he picked up the gold coin. She smiled as she looked back at him before she left the establishment. Sword Demon was in a daze. He held on to the gold coin with so much strength that he seemed to have mastered a kung fu technique. She has a good figure, beautiful looks, and even her voice is so pleasant. Ah, I think I'm in love with her, Fireball sighed. Drunk bro, you, eh? Fireball had waited until the lady left the tavern before turning to Goofy. Yet he saw Goofy suddenly stand up and run out. You really are my idol. Fireball stared at Goofy's back with a look of astonishment. Goofy rushed out of the tavern and looked around. He caught a glimpse of the lady taking a right turn into an alley and immediately gave her the chase. Sword Demon, you idiot! Goofy swore in his heart silently. Did you really fail to notice that the frost memories you left on the table had already been stolen as you played with the gold coin? No one would have suspected a lady like that would do such a thing. Goofy would not have believed it either had he not seen it with his eyes. It was far too despicable. Goofy gritted his teeth as this incident had made him recall a dark memory from his childhood. When he practiced martial arts, every day was very demanding. Goofy had to follow a strict diet with minimal food. Whenever he was eating, his second uncle's jinx of a child who would always come, hey, Xiao Fei, you dropped food on the ground again. You better pick it up, or else third uncle is going to beat you. Oh. The young Goofy hurriedly bent down to pick it up, but by the time he got back up again, his bowl of food had already been devoured by the child. That was not the only time his cousin fooled him. All sorts of tricks, such as telling him that there were flying saucers, his father was looking for him, or even Black Cat Detective was on television, were used on him until Goofy finally developed a resistance towards schemes of misdirection. By the time he had learned to deal with the deceptions and violently beat up the cousin, the other had already become tired of eating Goofy's meals and stopped playing tricks. After so many years, Goofy would still feel a burning desire to serve justice whenever he thought of those incidents. Today, he was finally given a chance. It was a pity the target was a lady. No matter what he did, he needed to have some discretion. Goofy pondered as he turned into the alley. He ended up coming face to face with someone else. The first thing he thought was, oh, what a smell. He reacted afterward and hurriedly took a step back. The lady observed him with squinted eyes. Why are you following me? Return it to me. Although his face flushed from that close contact just now, Goofy suppressed his sudden impulse to do it again and gave her a nasty look instead. Return what? The lady asked innocently. Are you trying to play the fool? You just took that dagger from the tavern. Return the frost memories. Goofy said. The lady was stunned. She was not actually playing the fool, She just had not expected Gu Fei to be here, attempting to reclaim the stolen weapon that was not his. She was rather confident in her beauty, so she thought he was some lustful person with nothing better to do than to flirt with her.